Hi, everybody. Welcome to this panel on mindful eating with our expert coach, Dr. Julie Rosenberg. Welcome, Julie. Thank you for being here today.
Hi, thanks, Lucia. Great to be with you and great to be with everyone. And this is one of my favorite topics, and I know it's one of yours as well, mindful eating. So delighted to share some thoughts about this.
Really excited to learn today. Yes, mindful eating is such an interesting topic. Before we begin, I do want to remind everybody that this is an interactive panel, which means that you can ask questions to Dr. Julie at any point during the panel. All you have to do is type your question in the Q&A box or the chat feature, and we'll address it here in the session. So with that said, Dr. Julie, I have a few questions today about mindful eating. I think it's such a broad topic in general, but such an interesting one to me. And to get started, it's sort of an introduction. What is mindful eating in general? How can we think about it?
So mindful eating really stems from the practice of mindfulness. And mindfulness, as I think most of us understand, is our ability to be in the present. We live in a world nowadays with so much distraction that we are pulled in a variety of directions. And so the onus of responsibility is on each of us to focus on what we're doing in the here and now. And so if I extend that a bit further, mindful eating is relatively simple, but not so simple in practice. It's focusing on the here and now when we're eating and when we're doing really anything that might be related to eating. So we pay better attention to our food, to our experience of our food, and if we're in community when we're eating, to our experience of each other as we're eating. So it's actually a really important concept and idea. And I'm again delighted to share a few thoughts about this because I'd love for everyone in the audience to be able to better practice mindful eating. I think it's associated with wonderful results in terms of how we feel about food and how we feel about ourselves.
Thank you, Dr. Julie. That makes a lot of sense. I'll share one of my challenges actually with mindful eating, and I would love to hear from the audience as well. What are some of your challenges when it comes to food and just sitting there and enjoying it mindfully? For me, I'm very busy. My schedule is very, very busy, and so I have a limited amount of time to eat. Can you suggest maybe what kind of environment I should be setting up for myself, or what kind of tips I can sort of implement to be able to eat more mindfully?
Sure. Well, one of the things about the idea of busyness, Lucy, and really for everyone, is that there are 440 minutes in a day, and we're all busy. And I would suggest that when we eat, we actually ideally would eat sitting down, or if we eat standing up in a place of quietude that is not filled with other distractions like our phones, like our TVs, etc. So we're in a singular place and we're focused on eating. And realistically, especially when we eat by ourselves, it probably doesn't take much more than 12, 15 minutes, to eat breakfast, to eat lunch, or possibly even to eat dinner. And I suggest we do that as a singular activity, again, without the distractions, so we can focus on our food, the enjoyment of our food, and we can actually slow down. Because one of the problems that folks get into is we eat so rapidly nowadays and on the go, or when we're doing a variety of other things, that our digestion is actually compromised by the pace of what we eat and the actual intake of the food. It may be compromised by eating too much because we're not paying attention. And so with mindful eating, we're actually paying attention to the pace of what we eat, to what we eat, and we're enjoying our food better because we're actually focusing on it.
That makes a lot of sense. And I really like what you said about, eating fast or eating too much. Actually, there's a few comments here that some folks seem to be having those same experiences. I eat fast and too much, and some agreements as well. I think those are great tips. In terms of benefits of mindful eating to our health, I know you said better digestion is one of them. What other ones can we benefit from mindful eating?
Well, one of the things about mindful eating, Lucia, is that it's a process, and it's a process that we really can undertake over time. So it's a behavior change. If you're not eating mindfully now, really to try to focus on the food, slow down, and pay attention to what you're eating. And what this is often associated with is not just improved digestion, but better food choices and also weight loss for those who want to lose weight, or maintenance of weight for those who are just interested in maintaining their weight, and an overall sense of better well-being. And why do I say that? Because this meaningful habit change is actually associated with paying attention. And when we pay attention, we have a tendency to eat when we're hungry, to eat until we're full or satiated and not beyond, and to really pay attention to the foods that we eat, and to know what foods affect us well and what foods might bother us. So I can give you my own example. I used to really like dairy. I like cheese. I enjoyed milk products, but they always bothered me. Ice cream bothered me. And I got to a point where I just didn't even want to eat those things because I paid attention to factors that were going on, just stomach distress and the like. When I ate dairy, I was paying attention, and it bothered me to the point where I no longer craved it, even though I still like ice cream. I'd rather feel well than eat something that doesn't make me feel well. And by and large, what I found by paying attention in the store is that there actually are alternatives to the things like ice cream that I might enjoy that don't have dairy in them, but would also fulfill that need. And we don't know those things if we don't pay attention to the reactions to our bodies, to the foods that we eat, or to even what the opportunities are to make a change. Does that make sense?
Makes total sense. And I like what you said about forming habits. I think the more we do it, the better choices we're going to make. And so it's a matter of just staying consistent. We do have a great question here by an attendee. They ask, does being fully hydrated before we eat make a difference?
I do think it makes a difference. If you are fully hydrated, first of all, it's very good for all the bodily processes to maintain hydration. And pretty much I like to say, you should drink 8 to 10 glasses of water a day, if not more, to maintain hydration. But if you are fully hydrated, that sense of hunger is usually not so great. And if you drink, water throughout your meal, that sense of hunger is also not so great. And one thing about your question about hydration, which is a great question, by hydration, we do typically mean water intake. So we're not talking about Coke, and we're not talking about sweetened beverages. We're not even talking about, other alternatives to water, because those things can add a high sugar load. A lot of carbonation, if you would drink soda or things like this, can add to GI distress. So we're really talking about water. And yes, it can help you feel more satiated and want less food intake during meals.
Thank you, Dr. Julie. Hopefully that answered the question. It definitely was very interesting to me. Water intake is such an important thing at every level. A question I have here, it's also another challenge I often have when it comes to being mindful. How can we implement mindfulness while shopping for food? When you're in the supermarket and you're trying to shop for food, what are some of the tips that you would recommend for that?
Well, first of all, a lot of people don't have time always to do this, myself included. But if you can think about what you need at the store and make a list before you go, spend 10 minutes thinking about it and follow your list in the store, you're more apt not to make, sudden purchases or purchases that might be at will in the moment, especially if you shop when you're hungry. The other thing is, it's really good to fill your plate with vegetables, green leafy vegetables and other healthy foods such as low glycemic fruits. And those include green apples and berries and things of that nature that don't have a lot of sugar. So if you're in the store, spending some additional time in that produce section is really good to do. And then depending on if you eat a plant-based diet or a diet that includes fish and meats and other things, looking for leaner meats is very important. Meats that are not very fatty, chicken, such as chicken breast that is not otherwise fatty, and then plant-based foods like tofu and tempeh and the like are good as well. But we want to really keep our plates filled with those green leafy vegetables. I think one of the problems in stores today is there's so much prepared food. And while I think that they often will give us all those ingredients that are in those prepared foods, we don't have the time or wherewithal, quite frankly, to see those tiny little letters that might be in the case that tell us what's in a certain product. They're often filled with a lot of calories. So making your own foods, making a list, spending time with fruits and vegetables, maybe staying away from those prepared foods. These are ways to shop a little more mindfully and actually to maybe enjoy the task of shopping and to possibly save money if you're not making a lot of impulse purchases, because going shopping nowadays is not inexpensive, and all of us are looking for ways to economize, and that's one of them.
It makes a lot of sense. I do tend to shop when I'm hungry, so I make sure I'll drink water and don't do that as well. We have a great question here, and I actually wondered this myself many times since I follow a plant-based diet. But how about foods like Beyond Meat or the Impossible Burger? What do you think about those foods?
So I think those are good opportunities. I think they're good avenues not to eat meat. I think, though, that there are a variety of vendors that make these various items. And I think it's the same story. It's good to know what's in your items. And then, I've seen people eat some of these plant-based items like, veggie burgers, and then they put cheese on top of them, and they might put mayonnaise on top of them, and maybe guacamole on top of them. And while I don't want to advise people not to eat what they enjoy, I want you to be aware of what you're eating. So I do think that these newer modalities of plant-based items are good, but know what's in them, know what you're putting on them, and know the amount that you might be eating. Because at the end of the day, some of our plant-based options do potentially have a lot of calories, especially if you're adding a lot to them. So again, mindfulness is about being present. It's about paying attention. So pay attention, and it may well be a very good opportunity for you.
Thank you, Dr. Julie. And then to sort of, capitalize on that aspect, how do you know when you are full or satisfied? Is there anything, because I oftentimes tend to overeat if I'm either stressed or not feeling good. So how do I know when it's sort of enough to stop eating?
Well, I think, our brain actually has an ability to reach a set point. So by that, I mean, when your stomach reaches a certain level of fullness, typically you should get a signal in your brain that states that you're full. To your point, when we're stressed or when we're anxious or when we have a lot of things going on, such as distractions, this sometimes can be a problem for us in recognizing that state of fullness. So being mindful when we eat really can help us to pay attention to our eating habits and improve our level of stress by doing our eating as a singular activity, and then allowing us to pay attention to when we're actually full. Does that make sense? So it's really the art of paying attention and allowing our bodies to reach that set point that we might normally have when we eat.
That makes a lot of sense. It's sort of being aware of your experience as you're eating. And that's why maybe watching TV or being on your phone is so distracting. You sort of miss that signal.
Right. One other thing, Lucia, that I neglected to mention is that, when we eat, especially in the US, our restaurants typically want to share with us that more is better. And I guess what I'd like to say is I don't want folks to be wasteful, but you definitely don't need to eat everything on your plate. I'm often accustomed to sharing meals with my partner, and we still have food left over because, he and I are not necessarily big eaters. Or for those of you who might be a larger eater and don't feel you need to eat everything because you're full on your plate, that you are served if you're going out, then save it. Take it home, eat it at another time, but don't feel compelled to eat more just because it's there. And again, our distractions often lead us to eat more when we're otherwise full. And so that's another trap we all probably get into. So share meals, take some home, pay attention, eat more slowly, and again, keep a mindful attitude during your eating time, and makes good sense.
Thank you, Dr. Julie. That does make a lot of sense. I like the idea of sharing. I think that's such a good concept too, We do have some comments here on the chat box. Question that we asked was, do you go to the supermarket hungry? Ryan suggests going to the grocery store on a full stomach, so that's great. We have a few people here saying they eat slow, and we do have a question here about how is, what is noodle soup like ramen good for you? And they mentioned that in Japan, a lot of people eat this and they're all skinny. So how can we make that connection, or is it a cultural thing?
So my comment about the ramen soup is that I think in moderation, ramen soup and things like it are not bad for us by any means. What I've noticed, having traveled myself to Japan, and I agree, being overweight in Japan is certainly not a problem like it is in the US. They do tend to eat a leaner, less fat, less abundant diet than we do. So if we look at the foods that were often served in restaurants, or even the things that we make, they're often much more laden with fat. And I think the leaner diet in Japan overall, especially the use of more fish products in the cleaner cooking that is employed over there, and oftentimes the slower eating process, is something that really probably leads to a more universal experience with, with weight being more aligned with what it should be for age and for body type than what we often experience here. So how the food is prepared, the amount of lean proteins, the amount of carbohydrates, etc., really will dictate our experience with our weight to a large extent. And culturally, there are definitely differences between the US and Japan. I don't think it's necessarily just related to the soup, but I do think if we do eat a soup, especially a leaner soup such as miso, or in some cases the ramen, as a prelude to our meal, that as well, the fluid base will help us feel a little more satiated and full.
It makes a lot of sense. I really like that about soups are great for any type of nutrition. So I think I definitely agree with that. I want to remind everybody we do have a couple of minutes left on this panel. If you have any questions about mindful eating or food in general or any habits, feel free to write them down. And in the meantime, I think it would be wonderful to sort of hop into a mindful meditation. What do you think, Dr. Julie?
Oh, for sure. Because I think doing this a few times throughout our day, just for a few moments, will really help set the tone for not only our mindful eating practice, but our practice and experience of ourselves and our mindful life throughout each day. So with me, if we'll just sit with our spines relatively straight, chin level to the ground, and feet on the floor, and shoulders back, but not stiff, and gently let's close our eyes together just for a moment. And let's take an inhale through our nose from the belly up into the chest, and hold it for a brief count of 3. And then gently, quietly, let's exhale slowly from the chest through the belly. And then together, let's take one more breath. From the belly, slowly up into the chest, and hold it for another moment, counting to 3 silently. And then slowly let it out, and then just breathe at a normal pace. And repeat silently with me. I will be mindful as I go through the day. I will be present for my life. And by being present, I will experience more comfort, more peace, and more joy. And together, let's open our eyes and just take a moment to check in with yourself. How do you feel, Lucia?
I feel wonderful. These sort of meditations make me feel very aware of my surroundings and where I am. So I think it feels great. We'd love to hear from the audience. What do you feel as well? How does meditation help you to stay present? I think it would be great to hear some experiences as well. I do have, another question regarding mindful eating and meditation. What kind of meditations can we do through the day in order to improve our mindful eating habits? I know this one's one, but perhaps something like visualization. What would you recommend in that case?
Well, I think in general, my goal would be for folks to practice mindfulness, because I think the practice in general of mindfulness and short meditations like we just did will help us in all aspects of our lives. For mindful eating in general, a brief meditation that I like to do is just, I want to be well. I will support myself in being well. And I might say that a few times with some deep breathing. I want to be well. I will support myself in being well. And this becomes honestly an ingrained habit and pattern where then you think about this as you go grocery shopping or when you're eating. And it's that desire to be well, Lucy, and really for everyone, that desire to be well that begins to dictate our habits. Because again, I'm being totally honest with my example earlier of ice cream. I still really like ice cream. It's probably my favorite go-to junk food. But I can go out now with friends and they have ice cream and I either get nothing or sorbet and I'm fine because I want to be well and I want to feel well. And my desire, my genuine desire to feel well supersedes everything else. And so I don't feel that I'm missing out anymore. I really don't. And so I'd encourage folks who have this fear of missing out, as we all do sometimes, to just practice that. You want to feel well. You deserve to feel well.
Thank you, Dr. Julie. Those are very wise words. We do have a question here. They ask, are you a member of the Center for Mindful Eating or in alignment with the Center for Mindful Eating?
I'm not officially a member of that center, but I do work with a number of mindfulness groups and yoga related groups. And I certainly believe in the premises of multiple mindfulness centers and encourage folks, if you find one or more that is of value and interest to you, that you participate.
Thank you, Dr. Julie. So those were all my questions for today. I think you gave us a lot of wisdom and knowledge about mindful eating. I really appreciate it. Do you want to close us out with some words of wisdom or a meditation?
Sure. Let me just remind folks that we do have on the app, right, Lucia, we do have a mindful eating course that I did. It's a brief course, and I'd encourage people to listen to it if they want a bit more. And let's just conclude with a few short breaths together. Again, let's gently close our eyes so we can be present with ourselves. And why don't we just repeat to ourselves this short mantra: I will be present. I deserve to be well. I will be present. I deserve to be well. And one last time, settle in and say quietly to yourself, I will be present. I deserve to be well. And gently open your eyes, and together we say, Namaste. Thanks so much for being here with me today, Lucia, and everyone. I've really enjoyed my time with you. Be well, everyone.